constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine what country, as a guest, who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
Send me the case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people out of our country.
Actually, it's not just about revoking.
You actually, Secretary Rubio, lunatic campus, we're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
she wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa.
Yes.
This exchange puts a major constitutional and immigration question directly under the spotlight. Where does the government's authority over visas end, and where do free speech protections begin? Representative Pramila Jayapal challenged Secretary of State Marco Rubio over the revocation of a Turkish graduate student's visa following an opinion piece she co-authored. Rubio's response centered on one key distinction: a foreign national may have First Amendment protections while physically in the United States, but that does not automatically create a constitutional right to receive or retain a student visa. As you listen, pay close attention to how both sides frame the legal issue, because they are arguing from fundamentally different starting points.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Remeza Öztürk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Öztürk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Öztürk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Öztürk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Öztürk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
But is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time, because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job. Who snatches her off the street?
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked?
Again,
Is that
law
accurate?
student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you
we deny
revoked her
visas every
student
day,
visa
and we will revoke and
based
continue
on
to
an
revoke
op-ed,
visas.
which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't
They're
do any of
guests.
that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
she
that's
wrote
what
an
you
op-ed,
claim.
and I'm talking to you about her particular
That's
case.
claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And we'll do more. We're going to do more of
I
them.
have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to
Are you
stir up
going to
trouble.
revoke the visa of somebody who made
Send me
that?
the case, I'll look at it.
that
I'm looking
statement?
to get crazy people out of
actually,
our
it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the
Secretary
visas of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You who granted that person
That's
to
a
enter
totally
the United
different process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
student visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and we'll revoke them.
You revoked a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time's expired. That's your claim.
This is where the exchange becomes much more complicated than a simple argument over free speech. Jayapal is pressing Rubio on a fundamental constitutional concern, whether the government can use its immigration authority in response to someone's political expression. Rubio, however, is drawing a distinction between the right to speak and the right to receive or maintain a particular immigration status. His argument is that a student visa is granted under federal immigration law and is not itself a constitutional entitlement. But there is another important layer to this confrontation. Jayapal is not only questioning the visa revocation, she is also challenging what happened afterward, including the arrest, detention, and reported denial of access to counsel. Rubio repeatedly separated those actions from his own role, arguing that other federal agencies were responsible for carrying out the arrest. That creates two different questions. Was the visa revocation legally justified, and was the subsequent enforcement action handled appropriately? Those questions should not automatically be treated as the same issue. And that distinction is exactly why this exchange is worth watching closely. Jayapal believes the government's actions raise serious First Amendment concerns, while Rubio insists the government has broad authority over foreign nationals seeking to remain in the country. So where do you stand? Should immigration authorities have greater limits when political speech is involved, or does existing visa law give the government the discretion Rubio described? What we just witnessed was a sharp disagreement over one of the most difficult areas of American law: what happens when immigration enforcement and constitutional principles intersect. Representative Jayapal repeatedly returned to the argument that political expression should not become the basis for government punishment, particularly when the speech at issue involved an opinion article. Secretary Rubio, meanwhile, focused on a different legal principle, that foreign nationals do not have a constitutional right to obtain a student visa and that federal immigration law gives the Secretary of State authority to make visa decisions. But the exchange also demonstrates why these cases cannot always be reduced to a single sentence or political talking point. There are several separate issues involved: the legal authority to revoke a visa, the circumstances surrounding the arrest, the government's justification for detention, and the broader question of how constitutional protections apply to non-citizens. Rubio addressed some of those questions by pointing to his statutory authority, while Jayapal continued to argue that government power cannot simply override constitutional protections because someone is in the country on a visa. And that is the larger issue viewers should take away from this hearing. The debate isn't simply about whether one politician won an argument. It is about how far government authority should extend when immigration status, political expression, and national security concerns collide. Do you think Rubio provided a sufficient legal explanation for the visa decision, or did Jayapal raise questions that still deserved a clearer answer? Share your perspective in the comments. And if you want more fact-focused breakdowns of the biggest political confrontations in Washington, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next major hearing, debate, or political showdown.